Before the age of steel and siege engines, nature forged its own impenetrable fortresses. These were not castles of stone, but titans of flesh and bone. In a world ruled by colossal predators, a unique lineage of herbivores evolved the ultimate defense, a full body of armor. From the iconic plate-backed Stegosaurus, with its formidable tail spikes, to the Ankylosaurus, a living tank so heavily shielded even a Tyrannosaurus would have to think twice. These were the armored giants of the Mesozoic. How did they live? How did they wield their incredible natural weaponry? And what secrets do their fossilized remains hold about survival in one of the most dangerous eras in Earth's history? This is the story of the Thyreophora, the shield-bearers, nature's masterpiece of defense, the walking citadels that roamed a lost world. Our story begins not with a roar, but with a quiet revolution. In the early Jurassic period, some 200 million years ago, the world was a crucible of evolution. Giant ferns and conifers dominated a landscape ruled by a new and terrifying class of hunter, the theropod dinosaurs. For the plant-eaters, life was a constant struggle for survival. Most relied on speed, size, or sheer numbers to escape the jaws of predators like Dilophosaurus. But a small, unassuming herbivore was pioneering a different strategy. Its name was Scutellosaurus, the little shielded lizard. Barely a meter long, Scutellosaurus was no giant. It walked on two legs, allowing it to move with agility through the ancient forests. But what set it apart were the hundreds of small, bony plates, or scutes, embedded in its skin. This was the dawn of biological armor. These were not scales, but true bone, growing from within the dermal layers. This was nature's first draft of a living fortress. Each scute was a tiny shield, a passive defense that made the animal a less appealing meal. A predator's bite would meet not soft flesh, but a mouthful of hard, unyielding armor. This innovation marked the birth of a new lineage of dinosaurs known as the Thyreophora, or the shield-bearers. Scutellosaurus represents a critical evolutionary junction. It demonstrates the immense pressure predators exerted on herbivore populations. While its bipedal stance suggests it still relied on flight as a primary defense, the armor was a radical new insurance policy. Paleontologists believe these early osteoderms may have served multiple purposes. Beyond protection, they could have helped regulate body temperature or been used for species recognition. But their primary function was clear: to make the dinosaur a harder target. This small creature was the ancestor of some of the most formidable defensive machines the world has ever seen. It was a living blueprint for a simple but profound idea: if you cannot outrun your enemy, you must be built to withstand them. The world of Scutellosaurus was one of constant peril. Its armor was a statement, a declaration that herbivores would not remain defenseless forever. It was the beginning of an evolutionary arms race that would span over 100 million years. The predators would grow larger, their teeth sharper, their claws more lethal. In response, the shield-bearers' armor would become thicker, their weapons more elaborate, and their bodies more specialized. The humble scutes of this small Jurassic dinosaur were the seeds from which titans would grow. From this simple beginning, a dynasty of armored giants was about to rise, trading speed for strength and transforming the very nature of prehistoric conflict. The evolutionary experiment that began with Scutellosaurus was a resounding success. The concept of armor was too effective to remain a niche strategy. As the Jurassic period progressed, the shield-bearers, or Thyreophorans, began to diversify, embarking on two distinct evolutionary paths that would lead to the creation of nature's most iconic living tanks. This crucial divergence gave rise to the Stegosauria, the plated dinosaurs, and the Ankylosauria, the armored clubtails. But before these two great houses became distinct, there were transitional forms that bridged the gap, showcasing the gradual process of adaptation. One of the most important figures in this story is Scutellosaurus. Living in the early Jurassic, it was a significant step up from its smaller ancestors. At around 4 meters long, it was a much more substantial animal. Crucially, it had abandoned the bipedal stance for a sturdy, four-legged posture. This was a necessary trade-off. To support a heavier body and more extensive armor, 4 pillars are better than 2. Its back was covered in parallel rows of oval plates, a more organized and robust defensive system than the scattered scutes of Scutellosaurus. Scutellosaurus was the template for the future, a low-slung, quadrupedal, armored herbivore. It was a walking fortress in its infancy, a clear signal of the direction this lineage was heading. The shift to a 4-legged stance had profound implications. It allowed for the development of a larger digestive system, necessary for breaking down the tough plant matter that comprised their diet. A bigger gut meant a bigger, heavier body, which in turn demanded stronger limbs and a more robust skeleton. This created a feedback loop. The need for better defense drove the evolution of armor, which required a larger body to carry it, which in turn made the animal a more tempting target, demanding even better armor. This is the essence of an evolutionary arms race. As predators like Megalosaurus grew in size and power, so too did their prey's defensive capabilities. The osteoderms themselves became more specialized. These bones, embedded directly in the skin, were not part of the internal skeleton. They were a separate, external layer of protection. In Scutellosaurus, they were relatively simple plates. But in its descendants, these osteoderms would evolve into an astonishing array of shapes and sizes, towering plates, sharp spikes, and even massive bone-shattering clubs. The shield-bearers were on the march. They were colonizing new continents and adapting to new environments. One branch, in particular, was about to take this defensive architecture to a spectacular new level, creating one of the most recognizable and bizarre silhouettes in the entire history of life. Of all the strange and wonderful forms that life has taken, few capture the imagination quite like Stegosaurus. With its immense size, tiny head, and the magnificent row of plates along its arched back, it seems almost like a creature of myth. Yet, for millions of years during the late Jurassic, this plated titan was a very real and successful part of the ecosystem. It roamed the floodplains of what is now North America, a key player in the famed Morrison Formation, living alongside the largest land animals of all time. Stegosaurus was a giant, reaching up to 9 meters in length and weighing over 5 tons. Its body was a study in contrasts. The hind legs were long and powerful, while the front limbs were short and stout, forcing its small head to hang low to the ground, perfect for browsing on low-growing ferns and cycads. For a creature of its size, its head was astonishingly small, housing a brain no larger than a dog's. This led to the outdated and now debunked theory of a second brain in its hips. In reality, this cavity housed a bundle of nerves, a sacral ganglion, which helped control its massive hindquarters and formidable tail, but it was not a center of thought. The most defining feature, of course, was the series of 17 large kite-shaped plates arranged along its spine. For over a century, paleontologists debated their exact arrangement. Early reconstructions showed them in a single file or a paired, symmetrical double row. However, modern analysis of fossil placements strongly suggests they were arranged in a staggered, alternating pattern down the animal's back. These plates were not directly attached to the skeleton. Like all osteoderms, they were rooted in the skin, held in place by a network of tough ligaments and muscle. They were not solid bone, but were filled with a complex network of channels, suggesting a rich blood supply. The Stegosauria were not limited to a single famous genus. They were a diverse and widespread family. In the fossil beds of Tanzania, we find Kentrosaurus, a smaller relative whose back was adorned with a combination of smaller plates and an intimidating array of long, sharp spikes. From China, there is Huayangosaurus, an earlier and more primitive member of the family. Each species adapted the basic stegosaurian body plan to its specific environment and the predators it faced. These plated titans were a global success story, a testament to a unique defensive strategy. But while the plates were their most spectacular feature, they were not the animal's primary weapon. That was reserved for the other end of the beast. In 1982, a popular cartoon strip depicted a group of cavemen in a lecture hall, where the professor points to a diagram of a Stegosaurus tail, noting the spikes are named the Thagomizer, after the late Thag Simmons. What began as a joke soon entered the scientific lexicon, becoming the official term for the cluster of sharp spikes at the end of a stegosaur's tail. It is a fittingly memorable name for one of the most effective and well-documented weapons in the dinosaur kingdom. Unlike the plates on its back, there is little debate about the Thagomizer's purpose. This was an active, lethal defense system. The evidence for its use is not just theoretical, it is written in the fossil record. The most compelling proof comes from a direct confrontation frozen in time. Paleontologists discovered the vertebra of an Allosaurus, the apex predator of the Morrison Formation, with a large conical puncture wound. The hole is a perfect match for the tail spike of a Stegosaurus. The bone around the injury shows signs of infection, indicating the Allosaurus survived the initial encounter, but may have later succumbed to its wound. This is the paleontological equivalent of a smoking gun, irrefutable evidence of a violent encounter between predator and prey, where the prey fought back and won. Further biomechanical studies have revealed just how formidable this weapon was. The Stegosaurus tail was not a stiff, clumsy club. It was composed of over 40 vertebrae, giving it incredible flexibility. It was powered by massive muscles anchored to its broad hips, allowing it to be swung from side to side with tremendous speed and force. The animal could likely pivot on its front legs, sweeping its tail in a wide, defensive arc. The spikes themselves, up to a meter in length, were robust and sharp, designed for piercing deep into the flesh of an attacker. This was not a weapon of last resort. It was a core part of the stegosaur's survival strategy. The existence of the Thagomizer forces us to reconsider the nature of this animal. The small brain did not equate to a passive or unintelligent creature. It possessed the necessary neurological wiring to wield its tail with precision and deadly intent. A Stegosaurus, when threatened, would not have simply stood its ground. It would have presented its flank, keeping its head away from danger while aiming its weaponized tail at the threat. A confrontation with an Allosaurus would have been a tense dance of positioning and timing, a high-stakes duel between teeth and claws on one side, and a powerful, spike-tipped appendage on the other. The Thagomizer was a great equalizer, ensuring that any predator thinking of a meal would have to risk a grievous injury. It was a clear message. This herbivore was not helpless. For all the certainty surrounding the Thagomizer, the most iconic feature of the Stegosaurus remains its greatest enigma. Why did it have those enormous, elaborate plates running down its back? For over a century, this question has sparked intense debate among paleontologists, leading to several compelling and sometimes conflicting theories. The most obvious answer, that they were for defense, is also the most problematic. While they certainly look intimidating, a closer examination reveals they may not have been effective shields. The plates were not solid, heavy bone. They were relatively thin and filled with a honeycomb of internal channels. A direct, powerful bite from a large predator like Allosaurus would have likely shattered them, offering little real protection to the vulnerable spine beneath. Their position high on the back also left the animal's flanks completely exposed. While they might have served as a visual deterrent, making the Stegosaurus appear larger and more formidable than it was, their structural weaknesses suggest that physical defense was not their primary role. This led to another popular theory: thermoregulation, The discovery of the intricate network of channels inside the plates suggested they were flush with blood. Could these structures have functioned as giant radiators? By pumping blood through the plates and exposing them to the air, the Stegosaurus could have dissipated excess body heat, a crucial ability for a multi-ton animal living in a warm climate. Conversely, by orienting them toward the sun, it could have absorbed heat to warm up on cool mornings. It is an elegant idea, similar to the function of an elephant's ears, but computer modeling has yielded mixed results, leaving the hypothesis plausible but unproven. The most widely accepted theory today synthesizes these ideas and adds a crucial social dimension. The plates were primarily for display. They were biological billboards. Their impressive size and unique shape would have made it easy for one Stegosaurus to recognize another from a great distance, a vital tool for species identification. Furthermore, they likely played a key role in social dynamics. Like the antlers of a moose or the tail of a peacock, the plates may have been a signal of health and fitness to attract mates and intimidate rivals. The rich blood supply that was once thought to be for thermoregulation could have been used to flush the plates with vibrant color, creating a spectacular and dynamic visual display. This theory is supported by the diversity of plate shapes seen across different stegosaur species, each with its own unique brand identity. Ultimately, the answer is likely a combination of all three. The plates offered some passive protection, may have assisted with temperature control, but their most important function was probably communication. They were a statement of identity, a symbol of strength, and a masterpiece of natural ornamentation. As the age of stegosaurs came to a close, they left behind this enduring riddle, a puzzle of bone and biology that reminds us that survival is not just about defense, but also about display. As the late Jurassic period reached its zenith, the family of Stegosauridae was not limited to the giants of North America. Across the vast, ancient continent of Gondwana, a different, arguably more aggressive-looking branch of the family tree was thriving. In the rich fossil beds of the Tendaguru Formation in modern-day Tanzania, paleontologists unearthed a creature that took the stegosaur defensive concept and sharpened it to a fine point. This was Kentrosaurus, the spiked lizard. Smaller than its famous cousin Stegosaurus, Kentrosaurus was a compact herbivore, measuring around 15 feet long. What it lacked in sheer size, it more than compensated for with an intimidating arsenal of spikes. Its name was not an exaggeration. This animal was a walking fortress of pointed bone. The classic double row of plates seen on Stegosaurus was present, but only on its neck and shoulders. From the midpoint of its back, these broad plates transformed dramatically. They narrowed and elongated into sharp, formidable spikes that continued in pairs all the way down to the tip of its tail. This created a defensive barrier that would have deterred even the most determined predators of its environment, such as Allosaurus. Any carnivore attempting to attack from the side or from behind would have been met with a wall of sharp points. But Kentrosaurus had another, even more specialized weapon. Protruding from its shoulders was a pair of exceptionally long, robust spikes, known as periscapular spines. These were not part of the dorsal row. They were a unique adaptation, jutting out sideways. Paleontologists believe these shoulder spikes provided crucial protection for its flanks, its most vulnerable area. An attacking predator would have had to risk serious injury to get past these lateral defenses to reach the animal's main body. The evolution of Kentrosaurus demonstrates the incredible diversity within the stegosaur group. It shows that there was no single blueprint for survival. While Stegosaurus relied on large plates for display and a specialized tail weapon, Kentrosaurus opted for a more comprehensive, all-encompassing spiky defense. It was a lower browser, likely feeding on cycads and other ground-level vegetation, its head held close to the earth. Its life was a testament to the principle that in a world of giants, sometimes the best defense is to be the most difficult painful meal imaginable. Yet, as successful as the stegosaurs were, their time was coming to an end. The Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, and a new world brought forth new predators and new challenges. The age of plates and spikes was about to be succeeded by an even more profound defensive revolution. The end of the Jurassic period marked a major transition in Earth's history. The continents continued to drift apart, climates shifted, and new forms of plant life began to flourish. This changing world saw the decline of the great stegosaurs, whose specialized defenses, while effective, were part of an older ecosystem. But nature's evolutionary arms race was far from over. From the shadows of the early Cretaceous, a new dynasty of armored herbivores emerged, ready to claim the title of nature's ultimate living tanks. This was the dawn of the Ankylosaurs. These were not merely successors to the stegosaurs. They were a complete reimagining of what a defensive dinosaur could be. Their name, meaning fused lizard, points to their core evolutionary innovation, a body almost entirely encased in a shell of bone. This new design philosophy moved away from isolated plates and spikes and toward comprehensive head-to-tail protection. The Ankylosaurs evolved a low-slung, incredibly wide body, creating a center of gravity so low that flipping one over would have been a monumental task for any predator. Their legs were short and stout, like the pillars of a temple, designed to support an immense weight of armor. Their skulls became thick, solid boxes of bone, often with extra layers of armor fused directly to the surface. Even their eyelids were armored in some species, turning the simple act of blinking into the closing of a bony shield. This new wave of armored dinosaurs quickly diversified into two major families, each with its own unique take on this defensive strategy. The first were the Nodosauridae, specialists in passive defense, often characterized by elaborate arrays of spines and shields. The second were the Ankylosauridae, who took defense a step further by developing one of the most remarkable weapons in the history of life on Earth. The rise of the Ankylosaurs coincided with the rise of larger, more intelligent predators, particularly the advanced tyrannosauroids that would come to dominate the late Cretaceous. The arms race had escalated. It was no longer enough to simply deter an attack with a few well-placed spikes. Survival now demanded a near-impenetrable fortress of a body. The Ankylosaur revolution was a response to a more dangerous world, a 70-million-year reign of herbivores that became the very definition of defensive perfection. But what exactly went into the construction of these incredible living fortresses? How did evolution forge skin and bone into a suit of armor that could withstand the onslaught of the Cretaceous's most fearsome hunters? To understand the success of the Ankylosaurs, we must look beneath the surface and examine the biological architecture that made them so formidable. Their defense was not just a single feature, but a complex, integrated system of anatomical marvels. The foundation of this system was the osteoderm. These were not scales, but plates of bone that grew directly within the dermis, the deep layer of the skin. They varied in size and shape, from small, pebble-like ossicles that created a flexible, chainmail-like covering, to large, flat plates called scutes that fused together to form a solid shield. In many species, particularly over the hips, these osteoderms fused to the underlying vertebrae, creating a rigid structure known as a sacral shield. This effectively welded the armor to the skeleton, making it an inseparable part of the animal's body. The skull of an ankylosaur was a masterpiece of fortification. The bones were thickened and fused, and additional layers of osteoderms were fused onto the outer surface, covering the skull in a helmet of bumpy, textured armor. This protection extended to the most delicate sensory organs. Some species, like Ankylosaurus itself, even possessed bony shutters that could slide down to protect their eyes. Internally, the skull held its own secrets. Complex looping nasal passages twisted through the snout. For years, scientists were puzzled by their function. Current theories suggest these passages could have been used for a variety of purposes: to warm and humidify inhaled air as resonating chambers for producing powerful, low-frequency sounds for communication, or even as a sophisticated cooling system for the brain, a vital feature for such a large, heavily insulated animal. The body plan was equally specialized. A wide, barrel-shaped torso housed a massive digestive system necessary for processing the tough, low-nutrient plants that made up their diet. This width, combined with short, powerful legs, gave them incredible stability. An ankylosaur was a living mountain, a low-profile target that was nearly impossible for a predator to topple. From its armored snout to its shielded back, every element of its anatomy was refined for one primary purpose: survival. It was a passive defense system of unparalleled sophistication. But while all ankylosaurs were built like fortresses, different families chose to specialize in different ways, leading to two distinct paths in the evolution of the ultimate armored dinosaur. Within the great ankylosaur lineage, the first major group to achieve widespread success was the Nodosauridae. These were the masters of passive defense, dinosaurs that relied on an impenetrable shield and an intimidating array of spines rather than an active, weaponized tail. Their name, meaning knobbed lizards, hints at the textured, bumpy armor that defined them. Nodosaurids generally had narrower snouts than their relatives and lacked the distinctive club at the end of their tails. Instead, their defense was concentrated on their torso and, most spectacularly, their shoulders. A prime example of this defensive strategy is Sauropelta, a nodosaur from the early Cretaceous of North America. Its back was covered in parallel rows of bony scutes, but its most striking features were the enormous, blade-like spines that erupted from its neck and shoulder region. These spines could be over a foot long, projecting outwards and forwards, creating a protective cage around the animal's vulnerable neck. Any predator, like the raptors it lived alongside, would have to bypass this formidable barrier to even attempt a strike. The pinnacle of our understanding of nodosaurid anatomy comes from a truly extraordinary fossil discovered in Alberta, Canada. Informally known as Borealopelta, this specimen is so perfectly preserved that it is often called a dinosaur mummy. Not just the bones, but the skin, the keratin sheaths on its horns, and even the contents of its last meal were fossilized. Borealopelta provides an unparalleled window into the life of a nodosaurid. We can see the arrangement of its armor in perfect detail, a solid shield of interlocking plates over its back, adorned with rows of spines, culminating in a massive pair of shoulder spikes nearly 2 feet long. The preservation was so exquisite that paleontologists were even able to identify pigment molecules, suggesting it had a form of counter-shading camouflage, darker on top and lighter on its underside. This implies that despite its incredible armor, its first line of defense was to avoid being seen at all. Nodosaurids were highly successful, thriving for millions of years across the globe. They were the immovable objects of the Cretaceous, herbivores that presented predators with a seemingly unsolvable problem. Their strategy was simple: stand your ground, lower your head, and let your armor and spines do the talking. Yet, as effective as this static defense was, another branch of the Ankylosaur family was experimenting with a far more active and ultimately more famous solution to the predator problem. While the Nodosaurids perfected passive defense, the other great family, the Ankylosauridae, were evolving a different answer to the predator question. They retained the heavy body armor, the low center of gravity, and the fortified skull, but they added a dynamic and devastating new element to their arsenal. They developed the ultimate defensive weapon, the tail club. This was not simply a lump of bone at the end of the tail. It was a complex, highly engineered biological sledgehammer. The evolution of this weapon required a complete redesign of the animal's posterior half. The last third of the tail became rigid and inflexible. The vertebrae developed overlapping, interlocking projections, fusing together to form a stiff, firm handle. This allowed the animal to swing the tail in a wide, powerful arc without it bending or buckling. At the very end of this handle, massive osteoderms, the same bony plates found in the skin, fused to each other and to the final tail vertebrae. They grew to an enormous size, forming a solid, heavy mass of bone that could weigh over 100 pounds. The biomechanics of this weapon are staggering. Studies using computer models have calculated the forces such a club could generate. A swing from an adult Ankylosaurus could deliver enough energy to shatter bone. The intended target for this incredible weapon was clear: the legs of the giant theropod predators, like Tyrannosaurus rex. While the armor on the Ankylosaur's back protected it from bites from above, a predator would still try to attack the legs to immobilize its prey. The tail club was the perfect countermeasure. A well-aimed blow could have easily broken the ankle or shin of a T-Rex, a catastrophic injury for a bipedal hunter that relied on its mobility. This was not just a deterrent, it was a crippling, active defense system. Fossils provide evidence of this violent interaction. Paleontologists have found ankylosaur tail clubs and tyrannosaur leg bones with signs of injury and healing consistent with such impacts. The Ankylosauridae, with genera like Euoplocephalus and the legendary Ankylosaurus itself, represent the apex of armored dinosaur evolution. They combined the passive, fortress-like defense of their ancestors with a weapon so powerful it could turn the hunter into the hunted. They were the living tanks of the Mesozoic, a final, definitive statement in the long and complex evolutionary arms race between predator and prey. The sun rises over a Jurassic landscape, casting long shadows from immense fern trees. In the dappled light, a lone Stegosaurus moves with a deliberate, rhythmic grace. Its life, like that of all armored giants, is dictated by a singular, relentless pursuit: food. Being a multi-ton herbivore is a full-time occupation. To fuel a body of this magnitude and maintain its defensive arsenal, a Stegosaurus would have needed to consume hundreds of pounds of plant matter every single day. But what was on the menu? Fossil evidence, including the shape of their skulls and teeth, provides the clues. Stegosaurus possessed a narrow beak, or rhamphotheca, perfect for selective browsing. It likely plucked the tender fronds of low-growing ferns, the fleshy leaves of cycads, and horsetails. Its teeth were small, leaf-shaped, and simple, not designed for heavy grinding, but for slicing vegetation before swallowing. Digestion was a far more powerful process, likely aided by a vast fermentation gut and perhaps gastroliths, or stomach stones, which would help break down the tough plant fibers. This was a slow and steady existence. Unlike nimble predators, these animals could not afford to waste energy. Their armor, while a formidable defense, was also a heavy burden, enforcing a slow pace of life. We see this pattern repeated in the Cretaceous with Ankylosaurus. Its broad, square muzzle suggests it was a less selective feeder, a bulk grazer that mowed down vegetation close to the ground. It would have consumed vast quantities of ferns and perhaps the earliest flowering plants, which were just beginning to diversify. For both Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus, life was a continuous cycle of eating and moving. They were living processors of vegetation, transforming the Mesozoic flora into the bone and keratin of their incredible armor. Every plate, every spike, every osteoderm embedded in their skin was built from the nutrients they patiently harvested from the ancient world. Their story is not one of dramatic chases, but of quiet, persistent strength, a testament to the power of a plant-based diet on a planetary scale. Yet, this placid existence required more than just a large stomach. It required a nervous system capable of navigating its world, finding food, and sensing danger, raising questions about the minds that operated these living fortresses. For over a century, a popular myth has shadowed the Stegosaurus, the notion of a second brain in its hips. Paleontologists in the 19th century, observing a large cavity in the pelvic region of the spinal column, theorized it housed a supplementary brain to control its massive hind legs and tail. This idea, while fascinating, has long been debunked. The cavity housed a glycogen body, an organ found in modern birds that serves as an energy store, not a center of thought. The reality is that the brain of a Stegosaurus was remarkably small for its size, perhaps no larger than a walnut. This small brain-to-body ratio has led to the perception of these animals as simple, instinct-driven creatures. But is that the whole story? Recent discoveries challenge this view. Fossil trackways found around the world show multiple individuals traveling together in the same direction, suggesting that at least some species of stegosaurs moved in groups or herds. This implies a level of social behavior, a structure that would require communication and coordination. And how did they communicate? Their most famous features, the plates, may hold the answer. While providing some defensive value, their structure, filled with blood vessels, suggests they were not primary shields. Instead, they may have been used for thermoregulation, absorbing and dissipating heat. Even more compelling is the idea that they were display structures. Flushed with blood, these plates could have changed color, serving as signals to attract mates, intimidate rivals, or warn predators. Imagine a herd of Stegosaurus, their plates blazing with vibrant colors, a spectacular display of Mesozoic life. The Ankylosaurs present a different picture. Fossils of these animals are almost always found alone, suggesting a more solitary existence. Their defense was all-encompassing, a passive shield that made group protection less necessary. Their complex nasal passages might have produced loud, low-frequency sounds for long-distance communication, but their lives were likely more isolated. These were not mindless eating machines. They were complex animals with behaviors shaped by millions of years of evolution. Their armor was for protection, but their plates, spikes, and horns also told a story to others of their kind, a silent language of dominance, courtship, and survival, a language that would be put to the ultimate test when confronted by the great predators of their age. The Mesozoic era was the stage for a grand evolutionary arms race, a relentless cycle of adaptation between predator and prey. Nowhere is this dynamic more apparent than in the story of the armored giants and the fearsome theropods that hunted them. In the Jurassic floodplains of North America, the primary adversary of the 10-ton Stegosaurus was the formidable Allosaurus. Fast, agile, and armed with a mouth full of serrated teeth, Allosaurus was an apex predator perfectly equipped to take down large prey. But attacking a full-grown Stegosaurus was a high-risk proposition. The herbivore's defense was not passive. It was an active, dangerous weapon. At the end of its powerful, flexible tail were 4 long spikes, a feature paleontologists have aptly named the thagomizer. A well-aimed swing of this tail could inflict devastating injuries, shattering bone and muscle. An Allosaurus would have had to be cautious, perhaps targeting younger or weaker individuals, or attempting to outmaneuver the creature to avoid its deadly rear guard. Fast forward 80 million years to the late Cretaceous, and the arms race had reached its zenith. The predator was now Tyrannosaurus rex, the most powerful terrestrial carnivore of all time. Its prey was Ankylosaurus, the ultimate living tank. Ankylosaurus had a completely different defensive strategy. It was low to the ground, covered in a fused shield of bony plates, making it almost impossible for a T-Rex to flip over to expose its soft underbelly. Its primary weapon was a massive club of solid bone at the end of its tail. Biomechanical studies show this club could be swung with enough force to shatter the leg bones of an attacking Tyrannosaurus. A single, well-placed strike could cripple the predator, a potentially fatal outcome in a world without medicine. The confrontation would have been a battle of wits and endurance. The T-Rex, with its superior intelligence and vision, would probe for weakness, looking for that one-in-a-million opportunity. The Ankylosaurus, relying on instinct, would hold its ground, tracking the predator's movements, its tail held ready. It was a stalemate written in bone and muscle, a clash of evolutionary titans where the unstoppable force met the immovable object. The outcome was never certain, but the struggle itself drove both predator and prey to new heights of power and sophistication. The dramatic conflicts of the Mesozoic are not lost to time. They are etched in the fossil record, preserved as silent testimony to ancient struggles for survival. Paleontologists, acting as forensic investigators, can read these stories in the bones. One of the most famous pieces of evidence comes from the Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur quarry in Utah. It is a vertebra from an Allosaurus, a predator. Punctured through the bone is a deep, conical wound. When scientists compared the injury to the tail spikes of a Stegosaurus, the match was perfect. The wound shows signs of infection, indicating the Allosaurus survived the initial encounter but may have later succumbed to its injury. This single fossil provides direct, tangible proof of a confrontation, transforming speculation into historical fact. The bones of the armored giants themselves are filled with similar tales. Healed fractures on ribs and shoulder blades suggest violent encounters. Some Ankylosaurus tail clubs show evidence of repeated stress and impact damage, consistent with their use as powerful weapons. But were they used only against predators? Some scientists propose that these clubs were also used in combat between rival ankylosaurs, settling disputes over territory or mating rights, much like modern giraffes use their necks. Perhaps the most breathtaking discovery of all is a specimen known as Borealopelta mark-michelli, unearthed in a Canadian mine. It is not just a skeleton, but a near-complete nodosaur, a cousin of Ankylosaurus, with its armor and skin miraculously preserved in 3 dimensions. This dinosaur mummy provides an unprecedented view of its appearance. Chemical analysis of its preserved skin reveals traces of pigment, suggesting it had reddish-brown coloration and employed countershading, a darker back and lighter underside, for camouflage. This was an animal trying to hide from predators, despite being covered in armor. Borealopelta's fossilized stomach contents even reveal its last meal, a specific selection of ferns. These remarkable fossils are windows into the past, bridging the immense gap of geologic time. They allow us to move beyond seeing these creatures as mere monsters of fantasy, and to understand them as living, breathing animals that fought, healed, and survived in a complex and perilous world, a world that stretched far beyond the familiar landscapes of North America. The story of the armored dinosaurs is not confined to one continent. It is a global saga that unfolded over 100 million years across the shifting landmasses of the Mesozoic world. From their origins in the early Jurassic, these creatures, known collectively as Thyreophorans, spread and diversified, conquering niches on nearly every continent. The 2 great families, the Stegosaurs and the Ankylosaurs, represent 2 distinct evolutionary waves of defensive innovation. The Jurassic was the age of the Stegosaurs. While Stegosaurus itself is famous from North America, its relatives were widespread. In the Tendaguru Formation of Tanzania, paleontologists uncovered Kentrosaurus, a smaller but arguably more formidable beast with a fearsome array of spikes running down its back and tail and a massive spike jutting from each shoulder. In China, fossils of Tuojiangosaurus and Chungkingosaurus reveal unique plate arrangements, showing how the group adapted to different environments and ecosystems across the supercontinent of Laurasia. But as the Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, the stegosaurs began to decline. A new dynasty of armored herbivores was rising to take their place, the Ankylosaurs. This group also achieved a global distribution. They split into two main branches: the nodosaurs, which were typically clubless but often sported large shoulder spikes, and the ankylosaurids, renowned for their heavy armor and powerful tail clubs. Fossils from Australia, Antarctica, and South America reveal a host of unique species that evolved in the southern hemisphere, on the great continent of Gondwana. In Europe, the dwarf nodosaur Thyreophora adapted to life on island archipelagos. In Asia, a spectacular variety of forms emerged, from the fused head armor of Cycania to the intricate patterns of other local species. This global radiation culminated in the appearance of the most advanced member of the family, Ankylosaurus, in North America at the very end of the Cretaceous. For over 100 million years, from the first small armored ancestors to the final impregnable giants, these animals were a resounding evolutionary success. They were a testament to the power of defense, a living testament that in the game of survival, sometimes the best defense is an impenetrable shield and a tail that hits back. They held their ground until the very end, standing as silent, armored sentinels as a cataclysm from the stars prepared to change the world forever. To understand the armored giants, we must first step into their world, a world both alien and strangely familiar. During the late Jurassic, some 150 million years ago, Stegosaurus roamed vast floodplains under a warm, humid sky. This was a greenhouse world, without polar ice caps and with seas far higher than today. The landscape was dominated not by grasses, which had not yet evolved, but by immense forests of conifers, ginkgos, and towering tree ferns. Beneath this high canopy, a dense understory of cycads and smaller ferns carpeted the ground, providing a near-endless buffet for herbivores. This was the Morrison Formation of North America, a vibrant ecosystem teeming with life. Towering sauropods like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus stripped leaves from the tallest trees, while Stegosaurus, a low-level browser, focused on the lusher, ground-level vegetation. But this prehistoric paradise was filled with peril. The constant threat of predation was a powerful evolutionary driver. Lurking in the fern-choked shadows was Allosaurus, a formidable carnivore with serrated teeth and powerful claws. The very presence of such efficient predators necessitated the evolution of equally efficient defenses, giving rise to the Stegosaurus's iconic plates and tail spikes. Fast forward to the late Cretaceous, the era of Ankylosaurus. The world had changed. Flowering plants had appeared, diversifying the landscape with new colors and textures. Continents continued to drift apart, creating more isolated environments. In the Hell Creek Formation of North America, Ankylosaurus shared its territory with the giant hadrosaurs like Edmontosaurus and the horned Triceratops. The climate was still warm, with lush coastal plains and forested river valleys. But the apex predator was now an even more imposing figure, Tyrannosaurus rex. This was a high-stakes evolutionary arms race. As predators became larger, faster, and more intelligent, the defenses of their prey had to become stronger, more robust, and more complex. The environment itself was a character in their story, a dynamic stage of lush flora, immense geological forces, and a constant, life-or-death struggle for survival. It was this crucible of predation and environmental pressure that forged the armored giants, shaping them into nature's ultimate living fortresses. Their armor was not a mere ornament. It was a direct response to the dangers that surrounded them at every turn. The life of an armored giant began in a state of extreme vulnerability. Buried in a nest of soil and vegetation, an egg held the potential for a future titan. But the journey from a fragile hatchling to a multi-ton fortress was fraught with danger. Upon breaking free from its shell, a young ankylosaur or stegosaur was small, soft-skinned, and an easy target for the multitude of smaller predators that patrolled the prehistoric undergrowth. Survival in these early days depended on camouflage, hiding, and perhaps the protection of a parent or a larger social group. The evidence for parental care is debated, but it's likely that safety was found in numbers. As the young dinosaur grew, a remarkable transformation began. The genetic blueprint for its defensive arsenal started to manifest. Small, bony nodules, or osteoderms, would begin to form within the skin, like seeds of future armor. Over months and years, these nodules would enlarge, thicken, and fuse, slowly creating the intricate mosaic of plates and scutes that would define the adult. For a young Stegosaurus, this meant the gradual emergence of its distinctive backplates and the lengthening of its tail spikes, or thagomizers. Initially small and flexible, the plates would harden and grow, while the spikes became formidable weapons. For a juvenile Ankylosaurus, the process involved the development of a full-body shield. Rows of osteoderms would cover its back and flanks, and its skull would thicken with fused bone. The most dramatic development was the tail club. What started as a flexible tail would see the final vertebrae stiffen and fuse, while massive osteoderms at the tip swelled into a solid, heavy mass of bone. This was a slow, energy-intensive process, fueled by a constant diet of low-lying vegetation. The dinosaur's metabolism worked over time, converting plant matter into bone and keratin. Each passing year brought greater size and more formidable armor, tipping the scales of survival in its favor. By the time it reached maturity, it was no longer the defenseless hatchling hiding in the ferns. It was a heavyweight, a walking citadel, whose very presence was a deterrent. The journey from hatchling to adult was the ultimate survival story, a testament to nature's ability to build impregnable defenses from the most delicate of beginnings. By the end of the Cretaceous period, 66 million years ago, the armored dinosaurs had reached the zenith of their evolution. Species like Ankylosaurus magniventris were the culmination of over 100 million years of refinement, living tanks perfected by the unceasing pressures of their world. They were larger, more heavily armored, and carried more powerful tail clubs than any of their predecessors. They moved with a confident, ground-shaking gait through the forests and plains of western North America, secure in their defensive might. Even the formidable Tyrannosaurus rex, the undisputed king of this lost world, would have regarded a full-grown Ankylosaurus with caution. These were the last of the Titans, the final and most impressive generation of a legendary dynasty. But the world they knew was on the brink of an unimaginable catastrophe. The danger would not come from a predator they could see or fight. It would come from the sky. Without warning, a 6-mile-wide asteroid, traveling at cosmic speeds, struck the planet in the region of the modern-day Gulf of Mexico. The immediate consequences were beyond comprehension. A blinding flash of light and an immense release of energy sent a thermal pulse across the continent. But this was only the beginning. The impact ejected trillions of tons of pulverized rock and dust into the atmosphere, shrouding the entire planet in a dense cloak of darkness. Sunlight, the source of all energy for the planet's ecosystems, was blocked. Temperatures plummeted, photosynthesis ceased, and the lush green world of the dinosaurs began to wither and decay. The great plant eaters, including the mighty Ankylosaurus, were the first to face the consequences. Their food supply vanished. As the herbivores starved, the great carnivores who hunted them were soon to follow. It was a global systems collapse. The intricate food web that had sustained life for millions of years unraveled in a matter of months and years. The armored giants, built to withstand the bite of a tyrannosaur, were defenseless against a silent, starving world. Their mighty armor could not protect them from an atmosphere turned toxic or a landscape barren of food. One by one, the last of the Titans fell, their reign ending not in a great battle, but in the quiet twilight of a dying planet. For millions of years, the armored giants lay silent, their magnificent forms encased in stone. They became ghosts in the rock, their stories waiting to be told. The next chapter of their saga began not in a Cretaceous forest, but in the windswept badlands of the modern world, with the arrival of paleontologists. These fossil hunters are detectives of deep time, searching for clues to a world lost to memory. The discovery of an armored dinosaur is a moment of pure scientific thrill. It often begins with a fragment, a single piece of bony armor, a section of a plate, or a vertebra weathering out of a hillside. This small clue can lead to a massive undertaking. Teams of scientists and volunteers descend on the site, armed with brushes, dental picks, and plaster. The work is painstaking and delicate. Each layer of rock is carefully removed to reveal the skeleton beneath, a process that can take months or even years. The goal is to excavate the fossils without damage and transport them safely to a laboratory. Once in the lab, the real detective work begins. Technicians meticulously clean the rock matrix from the bones, a process that can reveal astonishing details. Skin impressions preserved alongside the bone can tell us about the texture and pattern of their hide. The internal structure of the skull, analyzed with CT scanners, can offer insights into their senses of smell and hearing. The discovery of the Borealopelta nodosaur in a Canadian mine was a landmark event. It was not just a skeleton, but a near-complete dinosaur mummy, with its armor, scales, and even remnants of its last meal preserved in three-dimensional splendor. This incredible find allowed scientists to reconstruct its appearance and coloration with unprecedented accuracy, revealing a form of camouflage known as countershading. Every fossil tells a piece of the story. The fused vertebrae of an ankylosaur's tail reveal the mechanics of its powerful club. Healed injuries on bones provide direct evidence of predator encounters. By studying these armored ghosts, we resurrect them in our minds and in our museums, piecing together their anatomy, their behavior, and the epic world they once commanded. Though their world has long since vanished, the armored giants have left an indelible mark on ours. Their legacy is twofold, one of cultural fascination and another of profound scientific importance. In our collective imagination, Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus are among the most recognizable and beloved of all dinosaurs. They are icons of prehistoric strength and resilience, staples of museum halls, films, and children's books. Their unique and powerful appearance, the plates, the spikes, the clubbed tail, captures a sense of wonder, reminding us of a time when nature's designs were truly fantastical. They represent a successful evolutionary experiment in defense, a story of prey turning the tables on predators that resonates deeply with us. Scientifically, their legacy is even more significant. They are perfect case studies in coevolution, demonstrating the intricate dance between predator and prey. The development of their armor directly parallels the evolution of larger and more powerful theropods. Studying their biomechanics, how a Stegosaurus regulated its temperature with its plates, or how an Ankylosaurus generated immense force with its tail club, pushes the boundaries of our understanding of what is biologically possible. Their osteoderms have even inspired modern engineering. The concept of a strong, embedded armor that is both robust and flexible has parallels in the design of personal body armor and the development of composite materials for vehicles. They provide a biological blueprint for defense that engineers continue to study. But perhaps their greatest legacy is as a symbol of survival. For over 100 million years, these creatures thrived on every continent, adapting and evolving into some of the most well-defended animals the world has ever known. They are a testament to the power of passive defense and a reminder that in the grand story of life, success is not just about speed or aggression, but also about endurance. The living tanks are gone, but their story, written in bone and stone, continues to inspire awe and fuel our quest for knowledge about the planet's incredible past.